Welcome to the first legislative forum in a series of 3 being sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Johnson County during the 2026 Iowa legislative session. My name is Roxanne Hughes. I am a League of Women Voters of Johnson County, and I will be moderating today. Our timekeeper for today is Kathy Eisenhofer, also a League member. The League is dedicated to educating voters on political and ballot issues. We encourage informed citizen participation in government. The League does take positions after considerable study of issue and acts to influence decision makers on those issues. Membership is open to people of all genders, age 16 and older, and we invite you to join us. We could use your time, your talent, and your financial support for our ongoing operations. To learn more, speak to one of our members or reach out to us through our website or Facebook page. These forums are designed to give local citizens an opportunity to discuss state legislative issues with their elected officials while the legislative session is underway. All Johnson County legislators were invited to participate. The League thanks the legislators who are here today for this forum. We did receive an email from Senator Driscoll saying she was sorry she could not attend as she had to attend her daughter's event. We received no response from Representative Hora or Representative Lawler. Today's forum focuses on education issues, and I would like to introduce our legislators. Zach Walls, District 43, Janice Weiner, District 45, Representative Dave Jacoby, District 86, Representative Amy Nielsen, District 85, Representative Eleanor Levin, District 89, and Representative Adam Zapner, District 90. We'll start the forum with 3-minute summaries from each of our legislators on recent legislative matters of interest to them individually, starting with Senator Walls, District 43.
Well, thank you so much, Roxanne, and to the entire League for hosting our forums here this year. State Senator Zach Walls. This marks my 8th session in the Iowa legislature, representing Johnson County. I today represent Coralville, North Liberty, several West Side Iowa City neighborhoods, a good amount of rural Johnson County, and the community of Solon. This year, I am serving on the Workforce Committee. And I just want to say thank you. I'm really glad to be here this morning. I will tell you I'm not entirely sure what my travel schedule is going to look like for the months of February and March. So I'm not sure if I will be able to join again in future forums for the rest of this quarter. But if I'm not able to be with you in the future, I just want to say thank you. It has been a true honor and privilege to represent so many of you in the Iowa Senate for these last 8 years. I have learned so much. I've had the opportunity to be more involved with the community than I realized was going to be possible and to participate in forums like this. So I want to say thank you. This year, we obviously have quite a bit going on. I've had the opportunity to introduce 2 pieces of legislation that I'm particularly excited about. Last week, I was able to introduce my 2026 reproductive health care agenda, which is something that I think is absolutely vital for our state, given the attacks that we have seen on women's health care across our state and across our country since the overturning of Roe versus Wade. My proposal included 4 key components. First, a constitutional amendment to reverse the 6-week abortion ban that Republicans passed in 2023. Second, to codify the rights to contraception and to IVF and other fertility technologies in Iowa law. And finally, to safeguard the private medical data of Iowa women so it is not weaponized against them. This is something that I've been a passionate supporter of for many years, and I was very excited to introduce that last week. And then earlier this week, I had the opportunity in a bipartisan way to introduce a proposed amendment to the Iowa State Constitution that would, at a state level, reverse the decision by the United States Supreme Court called Citizens United that allowed for corporations to spend unlimited amounts of money influencing our elections. Well, that was a federal Supreme Court case. There are things that we can do at the state level, and I was very proud to be able to introduce that in a bipartisan way with State Senator Dave Sires. I know that we have a lot of things to get to today, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up there and turn it over to Senator Weiner.
Senator Weiner.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming out on this cold winter day. Appreciate it. And to those of you watching from home or streaming, welcome as well. State Senator Janice Weiner, I represent District 45, which is most of Iowa City and University Heights. I also have the honor of serving as the minority leader in the Iowa Senate. This is the second session now, and bizarrely, I'm one of the, after just over a year, I'm one of the more senior leaders in the legislature. What I want to know truly is where our Republican colleagues are, because they represent all of us too. We have to work together. We should be working together for the good of Iowans. It's been a trifecta now by the Republicans for nearly 10 years, and I would like to hear what they have to say. What we know, what my colleagues and I in the Iowa Senate as Democrats know coming into this session, having knocked doors from the Mississippi River to the Missouri River, is that Iowans are focused on things that are close to home, that under the rubric of affordability, they want housing they can afford. They want childcare that doesn't break the bank. They want grocery prices that aren't going up every week. They want health care that's both affordable and accessible. They want our cancer rates to go down, and they want us to clean up our water. And so that's really what we will be focusing on. If you will see some, you will definitely see some of the culture war and other bills running through. You will see some of the so-called higher education bills running through. We are going to try and turn the focus back every time to what Iowans really want. So we want to continue to hear from you during the session. I really ask that you stay informed and engaged. Please never hesitate to reach out. You'll hear more from us on about that at the end. But really, thank you for being here, and look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you. Representative Jacoby.
Well, thank you, and thank you everyone for being here. It's been kind of a rough couple of weeks to get started. Could I have a hug? but it's there we go. There we get started. But my name's Dave Jacoby, state rep from Coralville in western Iowa City. I serve as ranking member on Ways and Means, on government oversight, natural resources, and the Higher Education Committee. And I'm sure we'll have a few discussions on that today. I sure hope we do. What's near and dear to me is I continue to work on abolishing the puppy mills in Iowa. We have a number of puppy mills in Iowa that are repeat offenders. And it's time that we at least close the doors on the worst of the worst in Iowa. As someone who keeps an eye on how many dogs are in the shelters, and as a family who adopts dogs, we lost 3 dogs over the last year. We adopted 2 more dogs. Well, we adopted 1 dog, and then we got her home, and she needed another dog. So we fostered a second dog, a dog that I'm not used to. I'm used to Goldens and Labs. We fostered a Yorkie. But he's all ours. But we have to. But it's just important that we take a look at what's going on in Iowa. We are number 1 in the nation in unscrupulous puppy mills, and we need to do something about that. More importantly, too, I look forward to your questions and discussions today, because it's always good to be back.
Thanks. Representative Nielsen.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. I represent North Liberty, Solon, and some western parts of, I think northern parts of Iowa City. Sorry, I'm directionally challenged, among other things. Oh, dog park, sure.
Dog park.
Yeah.
We share the dog park.
It's very important. This year, I serve as ranking member on the State Government Committee. I'm also on local government, natural resources, appropriations, and I'm on a economic development budget sub this year. So a couple new things to work on this year, and this will be my 10th year going in. It's been a wild, almost decade. I personally don't have any bills this year. I'm just waiting for the 44 state government bills to finally drop so we can read those and see what we'll be fighting against. Hopefully there's one or two in there that's not horrible and we can actually get behind. Well, there is one. It's Adam's bill. He'll tell you about it. But again, just thank you for being here.
Thank you. Representative Levin.
Thank you and good morning. Eleanor Levin. I represent the south and west sides of Iowa City and University Heights residents. This year, I continue serving on the Education Policy Committee and the Education Budget Subcommittee. I also serve now as ranking member on the Natural Resources Committee and will be focusing in that capacity on water, air, and land that's going to build a great future for all Iowans. I continue to serve on Veterans Affairs, Public Safety, International Relations, and this year returned to my role on the Agriculture Committee, which I had not been on last year when I was asked to serve on another committee. Personally, my two North Stars, my two great focuses continue to be our environmental future and our educational future. I know that in the education realm, since that's the focus of today's forum, there are a few things I really want to see happen this year. I want to see SSA, I want to see school funding set on time, and I want to see an adequate number to make sure that we don't have almost 200 of our school districts having to go to rising property taxes in order to just keep the lights on. Personally, I think it's reasonable to ask for 1% for every year we've not even met inflation, but some folks have told me that 15% is unachievable. I say, why not ask for what we need? I've actually introduced legislation that would require SSA to go back to what was done early in my predecessor, Mary Masher's time in the legislature, that would require SSA to be set a year in advance so that school districts have the consistency and knowledge so that they can set their budgets instead of having to make things up and guess what rug is going to get pulled out from under them every year. Additional topics of discussion are certainly going to be ESAs, vouchers. Those funds are coming directly out of our public schools and ballooning every year. And so ending that program is a priority for me. Looking forward to your questions. There's plenty more to talk about, but very happy to see everyone here and grateful to everyone who's joining us online.
Thank you. Representative Savner.
Thank you so much for having me today. Really appreciate the league and the opportunity to share what we're working on. In my district, whether I'm talking to undergraduate students, to City High parents, to senior citizens, the number one issue I continue to hear about is affordability, and I'm taking that really seriously. In my role as ranking member of the local government committee, I think there's really an opportunity to work on the affordability of housing, which is the largest part of most people's budget. Last week, 2 weeks ago, I was proud to work on legislation with Representative Lawler, actually, that would make it easier to build new housing in Iowa. We know that here in Johnson County, we're nearly 15,000 units short, and that causes a lot of strain. Anyone who's tried to rent an apartment in Iowa City knows that. Your rents might be going up $100 or $200. You might have to show up 6 months or a year in advance to even get a decent unit. That bill passed unanimously out of a subcommittee of the local government committee last week. I'm hoping to get it out of the full committee and onto the floor, and I think it would make a big difference in affordability for many Iowans. There's other pieces of affordability. Iowa House Democrats were committed to raising the minimum wage. And obviously, if you're able to earn more money, it makes things like your rent more affordable. And then also, we know that Iowans are facing really scary increases in their insurance premiums due to Marionette Miller Meeks, Joni Ernst, federal Republicans failing to extend those Affordable Care Act subsidies. And so, Iowa House Democrats, we think that we need to do something, that the state cannot fail to act in this moment. And we want to make sure that we're helping Iowans afford health care, because I've heard from too many people who have seen their premiums potentially double or more. And I think it's very scary for people. We may see people end up without insurance. That affordability focus is really different from what we see Iowa House Republicans working on in the first couple weeks of the session. I think there was a bill to take over some counties in Illinois. They're continuing to file don't say gay bills, despite the fact that their previous one is caught up in millions of dollars of litigation. And so I think there's a big difference there in our priorities. I'm focused on affordability for people in my district.
Thank you very much for all your legislative updates. Okay, at this time, we are going to begin questions, starting with one from the league itself. We remind all participants that questions are limited to 1 minute. Please observe this time limit so that legislators can address as many questions as possible. Legislators, please limit your responses to 2 minutes. All legislators are welcome to join in responding to each question. Number 1, Iowa's United Allocation Plan, known as UAP, is a federal education funding initiative approved in January 2026, making Iowa the first state to receive such flexibility, allowing it to pool funds from several Elementary and Secondary Education Act programs that focus on teacher training, English learners, after school, and academic enrichment into a single fund with fewer restrictions, aiming to reduce bureaucracy and shift resources to classroom level needs like science, tutoring, science of reading, tutoring, and teacher development, ultimately increasing state control over federal education dollars. What do you see as the pros and cons of Iowa implementing this plan? Senator Walz.
Yeah, great question, and I feel like this is something that has flown a little under the radar if you aren't following education policy very closely. At a high level, I think everybody can agree that it is really important to listen to people who are on the ground in the classroom, but the problem is that is exactly the opposite of what Republicans in Des Moines have been doing for the last decade that they've controlled state government. I cannot tell you how many teachers I have spoken with who have considered leaving or have left the profession because of the disrespect that Iowa Republicans have demonstrated in passing bill after bill after bill, restricting the ability of teachers to teach in the classroom, trying to control the curriculum, control what books can be used, what topics can be taught, and so much more. And so whenever Republicans stand up and talk about how we need to restore more flexibility in the classroom, I just wish that they would take themselves seriously and actually pass bills that would reverse the damaging things that they have done over the last decade. When it comes specifically to this proposal, the thing that I would tell you that I am very concerned about is the preference about private education over public education. Since Republicans passed the private school voucher bill several years ago, more than $1 billion has been diverted out of our public education system with no oversight, no accountability, and virtually no restriction how those dollars can be spent. The single best thing that Iowa Republicans could do to restore the strength, the status of Iowa's public education system would be to end the voucher program, to fully fund our public schools. As Representative Levin pointed out, 15 years that Republican funding for education has not kept up with the cost of living. That is absolutely unacceptable, and it is exactly why Iowa's public education system, which used to lead the country, has fallen to the middle of the pack. This is too little, too late, and it's not going to go to actually solving the problems that are facing Iowa public educators.
Senator Weiner.
I would agree with what Senator Walz said. In addition, I'm not convinced, I don't really trust our colleagues in state government under Governor Reynolds to do what's right for Iowa students behind closed doors. We don't know what they're going to do with those dollars, how they're going to allocate those dollars, if the correct dollars are going to go to special ed, if the dollars that are needed are going to go to other programs. I'm very concerned with not having visibility or sufficient visibility into how those funds are used. And I would echo what Senator Walz said in that the enormous irony of saying, well, great, we're going to have, let's allow states to control this money that the federal government is controlling, while at the same time we see bill after bill that restricts the ability of local government at all levels to do its job at the local level. We've already seen that there's going to be another proposal this year to take over early childhood Iowa and push it up to the state, which is not going to help our kids. It's not going to help us get the programs to them that we need. So I am highly skeptical. I would really like to see a bright light shined on this and have accountability and transparency into how these dollars are allocated.
Representative Jacoby.
I think it's a great idea. with Governor Rob Sand. But in spite of that, you mentioned the senator mentioned the word that I was going to mention repeatedly, and it's trust. There's a huge distrust, especially between public education and the current administration. And there's a big distrust between any counties, any cities of significant size, because the emphasis, the weight, if you will, is put toward trying to salvage schools that are closing. We're focusing on rural areas that, quite frankly, will struggle to stay open because they just don't have the number of students there. So we're investing millions and millions in those areas while we're not properly propping up our cities, our bigger schools, our bigger schools, and the students that they have. We have the numbers. If you're wondering where the students are, well, we got them. We have them, and we're serving them. And so I think trust is the big word when it comes. Do I trust the fact that we have a former regent now as our main contact in DC for some of these grants? Well, that answer would be no. It goes to trust, and it goes to a true intent of helping our students in all schools.
Representative Nielsen.
Thank you. I don't actually have a lot to add to that, and I know that Representative Levin is actually on the Education Committee, so I think you should probably hear more from her than me, honestly. So she could have my extra minutes.
Okay, Representative Levin.
I wish I needed it. The truth is there hasn't been a lot of transparency in how these funds are going to be allocated. In my view, I think the word skeptical that Senator Weiner used is the perfect word for how I feel about this. I think there is, some potential to the idea. I like the idea of local districts being able to put funds where they see the need, but that's not how it's looking like this is going to be done. There's no clarity on where or when or how locals will be included in decisions about distribution of these funds. In my view, the intent is to fill in funding for unfunded mandates by taking it away from targeted groups that have needed these programs and have been served by these targeted funds. And so I'm highly skeptical. I know there will be some ways that these funds that will be used that will be great for students. And I look forward to those stories, but I do think that we need to be paying very close attention to who gets to make those decisions and how local districts are included and teachers are included in making those decisions.
Representative Sapner.
I don't have much to add except to say, there's a lot to say about 9 years of Kim Reynolds and Republican trifecta. Probably no larger harm than what she's done to the public education in the state of Iowa. Damage that will take years and years and years for us to fix. And so, no, I don't trust her with President Trump to fix it on the way out.
Roxanne, if there's one just very brief thing I could add about Secretary of Education Linda McMahon, this is a person leading the Department of Education at the federal level who was asked several months ago about artificial intelligence or AI, and she thought the question was about A1, the steak sauce.
Oh my gosh.
If that's the person that you trust to lead the Department of Education at the federal level, you should be excited about this plan. If not, I think you should have some serious concerns.
Thank you. We have representatives from the following education groups with us today, and we're going to allow them to ask questions before our audience questions. We have the Iowa City Community School District, the Iowa City Education Association, the American Association of University Professors, and the 4 Cs of Johnson County. Okay, so you can, Iowa City. Yep, go to the mic, state your name and who you're representing, and fire away.
Charlie and Brady have a fist fight. Who's going to go first? Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I'm Charlie Eastham, a member of the Iowa City Community School District School Board.
Charlie, you need to get a lot closer to the mic.
It may not be on.
Ty's got it.
Oh, all right. Okay, I'm Charlie Eastham, member of the Iowa City Community School District School Board, here with Brady Schutt, the president of the Education Association in the district. And we have two parts to our question here. So maybe you'll get double your time in responding. My part is to ask, or to say that one of our priorities as school board members is to protect our ability to make decisions as locally elected leaders. Recent actions by the state legislature have challenged that ability. Could you please talk about specific actions local voters and concerned members of our community can take to help us reinforce the importance of local control for our locally elected school boards?
You can just respond in any order you'd like up here.
Was it a two-parter? Brady, you want to also
Sure.
chime in?
I'm Brady. Yeah, I think it'll be a good follow-up on that. So Brady Shutt, President of the Iowa City Education Association, thank you to the League for hosting this and to our legislators for being here. Those of you who are here, we really appreciate that, and all the folks who are here today and also watching online. So just as a follow-up, I think to amplify the need for longer-term planning, it has been a challenge for our school district. We have a fantastic partnership, which is why we're asking together to sort of show what the strength of that. But it is challenging when we don't know what SSA is in a timely fashion. And obviously this session, property tax reform is a top ticket item. We have at least 4 proposals that I know of. I appreciate Representative Jacoby for putting out a proposal early in the session. So for us, we see those intersecting and also serving as a real potential challenge to our ability at the local level to make the decisions that we need to make through our school board. And I would say that our other municipalities and cities and councils also feel that same way. So I guess to go along with Director Easton's question, if you could tie in property tax reform, where that's going, and maybe even, SSA, because it really does hinder the ability to make decisions at the local level without knowing some of those factors.
Well, thank you for bringing that up, Brady. Where do you start?
Don't make the rollback joke.
It was mentioned earlier about Representative Masher for years had bills that would set school funding out a year or two in advance. For over a decade, I had a bill that would set school funding a year in advance and for 2 years. So you're actually on a rotating budget every 3 years to do that 2 years out, and so you could actually establish your budget so admin isn't spending 80% of their time for 3 months drawing up different scenarios, and teachers getting a pink slip, not a pink slip, maybe a reorg slip. The property tax thing ties in with that. There are 4 proposals right now. 3 of them are totally unworkable. What they do show is a complete misunderstanding or non-understanding of what property taxes are and do. And it also ties in with Charlie's question. It shows that they don't fully understand property taxes and they don't care about local control. They don't care, they want to control it. It's interesting that you see 2 proposals put a 2% cap. 2% cap on property taxes. Well, that's very interesting. The governor's budget is 3.5% over what she had last year. So that's basically a case of this is what you do, but don't watch what I do. Their budget is in big trouble. They've used one-time money over and over again, and that's why you probably won't see SSA determined on a timely basis. It'll either be if we do it at all, on a timely basis, it'll be 0 or 1%. If any chance for any more, it'll be after the March Revenue Estimating Conference. The property tax thing is big. Everyone has it in the back of their mind. The House Democrats' proposal actually puts the limit at 4% per year. That's double what the Republicans are proposing, but it puts a certainty that you know what your tax bill will be next year, but also schools, cities and counties, and don't forget community colleges will have certainty as to what they have coming in for revenue in the upcoming years. So, before I close out, one of their proposals is to send you a letter that better explains property taxes. Well, man, that'll clear everything up. I don't know. I've been reading mine for years, and I can read it just fine. It says right there, this is the rate I pay for the schools. This is the rate I pay for the city of Coralville. This is the rate I pay for Johnson County, and this is the rate I pay to the community college. So I don't think that that's going to help much, but I do think, and thank you again for bringing up the House Dem proposal, because it is a solid proposal, and I think it provides the two S's, simplicity and certainty. I thought I'd try to get away with that with the education group, but I didn't get far, did I?
You know, about a year ago, I was out knocking doors in Carter Lake, Iowa, competitive state house seat, and you know, pretty conservative part of the state, and I'm knocking doors, and I hand this guy the piece of literature for our candidate, and he says to me, you know, I love looking at these things to see all the lies politicians are saying. He says, just last week, I got a letter from my state senator, Dan Dawson, who's the chair of the Ways and Means Committee in the Senate, put out one of those plans that said he lowered my property taxes. And just below it was my property tax bill, which went up. And so these are not the people that local government should be taking lectures from. I mean, they pretty much have created a budget disaster in the state of Iowa, over $1 billion shortfall. Like Dave said, one-time money for ongoing expenses. They have failed to lower property taxes with their previous, 7 property tax bills that were supposed to lower property taxes? I've lost count. So, I mean, I think we elect a city council, we elect a school board, we vote on issues like school bonds. The first vote I ever took in my life was in 2017 to create all these wonderful new facilities that the school district has done in Iowa City. And I think that's a good thing. I think voters should have the ability to invest in public education. Clearly, it's a priority for Iowa voters, not Iowa Republicans.
And not only do we elect a school board and a city council, but Carter Lake elects a school board and a city council, and so does Emmitsburg, and so does Decorah, and those local entities have the trust of their locals. What we're seeing is that they don't have the trust of people who live across the state and think, I know what's better for you than the people you've locally elected. I feel incredibly lucky to have accessible local officials here in Johnson County and in Iowa City. I've talked to people when I'm at the doors in other parts of the state who feel exactly the same. They run into their city council members and their school board members at the coffee shop, at the grocery store, at pick up in the line at the gas station. And they have the chance to talk with them and try to understand what they're doing for their kids and for their schools, how they're setting budgets, how they're prioritizing facilities, how they're prioritizing class size, things like that. The folks in Decorah don't have the chance to go question Dan Dawson about why he's trying to make decisions about their schools. And I think that message just needs to be front and center for everyone. We have local elected officials for a reason. They're close to us, we can talk to them, and I feel very lucky with that system.
I mean, property tax, our colleagues signaled for forever the property taxes were going to be a big issue this year. They signaled that they were going to be a big issue last year, but nothing ever got done on them. One of the things that must happen as subcommittees, in particular as subcommittees start going, is that local officials, local government officials, school board, city council, supervisors, anybody else, come to the table for all those subcommittee meetings and tell their stories and tell why that whatever it is they're proposing is or isn't going to work. But most importantly, they need to tell their stories. We have heard in various meetings in the intersession from people from all sorts of different levels of local government as to why prior legislation is not working for them, why the prior property tax bill, was it House File 718? 718 hurt them. Why the proposal that the law that went into effect that created new mental health and substance use district is not working for them and in fact is costing their counties more when they can't afford the money. The irony, just the enormous irony of the governor telling, for example, Cedar Rapids and other school districts, well, you used one-time funds from COVID to fund, and that's why you're having problems, when her budget from last year is $1.26 billion in the red, and the budget she's proposing for this coming fiscal year is $1.2 billion in the red, using one-time funds for ongoing expenses, is quite, I'm not even sure what the word for it is, when every single local government, and you know that as well as I, the school board, the city councils, the supervisors, have to balance their budgets every year. So I would urge you to continue to bring your stories to everyone, not just to us. We're there for you all the time. We want to hear your stories, but make sure when you're telling your stories that you send an email to every single legislator, not just the people who are on the committees, because they need to understand how this is impacting specific kids and specific classrooms and class sizes and the ability to do your job.
So Charlie, you asked, what can we do? What we can do is elect legislators and a governor who care about public education. That is what we can do. We are very fortunate in Johnson County to have 6 legislators sitting at these tables who are very strong supporters of public education, understand that it is reasonable to ask the wealthiest people in our society to pay their fair share, and we need to make sure that we have more representatives and more senators across the rest of the state who share that fundamental commitment. And so I would encourage everybody here who cares about this. We have an election that is only 286 days away. We are counting. This is the time to start thinking about who you want to support, what campaigns you want to get involved with, because that is where this decision is going to be made. To Brady's question about the longer term planning, every budget has 2 parts, costs and revenue. On the cost side, we have seen a number of policy decisions at both the state and the federal level that have exploded costs for local government, whether it is cities, counties, or school boards. Those are policies that need to be reversed, and that is only going to happen if we have people in power who are actually going to take that seriously. On the other side of the ledger, you have revenue. The reason that revenue is what it is because you have a Republican majority that decided that they wanted to give another tax cut to the wealthiest Iowans. That money that we have now since given back to the very wealthiest people is what was sent back to local governments to buy down property tax so that those of us who pay property taxes, which is everybody, right, could actually have that under control. When Republicans cut taxes for the wealthiest, that is why property taxes continue to go up at the local level. This is the fundamental choice in the election that is coming up in November. Do we want to live in a state where the wealthiest get another tax cut that is not going to pay for itself because they never do? Or do we want to live in a state and in a country where the wealthiest pay their fair share? We have the ability to invest in things like public education that all of us benefit from, and actually have a society where every single person who calls this state home can trust that they can retire with security and dignity, that their children and grandchildren will get a great public education, and that we can be proud to live in the state of Iowa.
If it would be okay for me to add just 30 seconds to what Senator Walz just said, we need to be looking at taxes as an overall ecosystem. Property taxes are one piece. The fairest tax is income taxes. When you get down to property taxes and sales tax, that becomes much more regressive. So how do we, my question to folks is, how do we actually invest in our people, and do we want to invest in our people? My answer is yes. I think your answer is yes, but that's not served by taking all this piecemeal.
Thank you. Do we have someone here from the American Association of University Professors?
Mm-hmm. We do. Hi, thank you for being with us, taking part of your Saturday morning. I'm Ann Rhodes. I'm the chair of the executive committee of the AAUP, and I'm a somewhat retired faculty member. I've reviewed the latest batch of bills slapping around the regions, and my question is, how can we help you defend us against the various assaults on academic freedom and autonomy and teaching and curriculum. And what can we do? What can we provide to you to help you rebut some of those? And I really appreciate Senator Jacoby's analysis about a lack of trust, because certainly nobody trusts the universities.
Well, I am blessed with being on the higher ed committee. As I mentioned earlier, can I have a hug? But we have about 25 bills so far this year. None of them, in my opinion, does anything positive for students, for professors, for the universities as a whole. They had the kickoff for the Center for Intellectual Freedom. Center for Instilling Fear, the CIF, and I wasn't invited, but I went anyway, and it was interesting to listen to the panels. And I'm almost verbatim quoting. One of the panelists said, "The problem with STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math in the United States is that we've allowed girls and minorities to participate." That's what he said out loud. This is what we're dealing with in terms of a legislature, that we have some very angry people, what they view as liberal bastions of the community, and I'm going, well, maybe we are, so what? But the number of bills, one bill that I helped kill temporarily, at least a couple days ago, was a bill that would give higher levels of due process to white male students than any other students. So, and the teachers that were in the Center for Intellectual Freedom. So I brought up simply that this goes against the 5th and 14th Amendment, and I have some interesting amendments that will help us set immigration policy in the state. The chair got very angry, pounded on the table, and dismissed the committee. He did call me on my way home, and he apologized for his behavior. But better yet, he said, and I have to admit, you're right, this bill is unworkable and gives other people unfair due process. But in closing, I saw the time, Kathy, is there are solutions. Governor Rob Sand, and maybe even electing someone senator on a national basis. But thank you for being here, Ann.
So thank you for all the help over the years. We appreciate it.
Thanks for that question. A couple weeks ago, I graduated with my master's in data science from the University of Iowa. I feel very, very lucky to live in a state that values public education, that made it affordable for me to do so. I had wonderful professors. No one tried to indoctrinate me other than, do your homework. They taught me how to code. So I feel very lucky to live in a state that values public education, and I hope I can use those skills to help the people of the state of Iowa. Thousands of Iowans use skills they developed here to help the people of Iowa every day. I mean, go into any dentist office in the state, odds are they studied at the University of Iowa. Just a couple months ago, Dr. Mike Welsh, a researcher at the University of Iowa, received one of the largest prizes in science for work that, cured cystic fibrosis for 80% of people with the disease. It used to be a death sentence in your teenage years. Now you have people living into their 60s and 70s because of work that happened here at the University of Iowa with academic freedom. About a block from my house, Kurt Vonnegut sat and wrote Slaughterhouse-Five at the Writers' Workshop. We have an incredible cultural impact on the world because of what happens here at the University of Iowa with academic freedom. And the idea that someone like Taylor Collins is going to ruin that is just so sad and such a mistake, because we're blessed to have 3 wonderful universities in the state of Iowa. And I want you to know, I think everybody up here is determined to fight and fight and fight to maintain the wonderful public universities, to ensure they're affordable and accessible for people in our state.
Well, let us know how we can help you.
I would just say, Ann, that you said no one trusts the colleges and universities, and I would say there are a lot of people statewide who trust and love and value and support the colleges and universities in this state, community colleges, private colleges, and public universities. And there are people running for office across the state and seeking out opportunities to uplift those voices and make sure that they are having their voices heard, no matter how tough their district might be to win, would be a huge step.
Okay, thank you.
And if there's one thing I could add to this, I think it would be very beneficial to the University of Iowa, to Iowa State, to the University of Northern Iowa, for more of our professors to spend more time outside of Johnson County, Story County, and Blackhawk County. There are other universities across the country where faculty are they have like structured programs that get professors out and across the rest of the state, whether that's through bus tours or scheduled visits, just showing up in person. I think that there is a trust gap, and that's just true. And I don't think that is an intentional decision that any single person is responsible for. But I will tell you, there is no substitute for showing up, for having conversations, for learning more about the concerns that people are expressing who live in some of these communities, to talking in a candid way about what people here are teaching, so that folks can understand that despite what they might see on Facebook or on Fox News, that actually the vast majority of what students at our Regents universities are learning are, reading, writing, arithmetic, and a lot more, right? And so that is something that I've encouraged various University of Iowa leaders over the years to pursue. I don't think it's probably happening at the level that I would personally like to see. And that's not the fault of UP or anything like that. But I would say to the extent that you have the ability to help shape those conversations within the university among other professors and faculty, taking it upon yourselves to organize some of those trips would I think that would help. I can't tell you that it'll solve every problem or rebuild trust overnight, because that's not how trust works. But what I can tell you is that we all here, I think, have a deep appreciation for the very important contributions that are made by our Regents universities. I think Representative Levin is exactly correct that there is a broad trust in the University of Iowa, that if you have, a life-threatening emergency, if you are, as Representative Zabner said, if you got, a tooth problem that needs to be fixed, you would much rather have someone who is trained at the University of Iowa than a fly-by-night, program, what have you. So people appreciate the impact that the university has in their lives, and I think that we probably do have work to do in showing up and talking about the additional incredible things that are happening here in our institutions of higher education, because, when you've got people like Senator Jesse Green, who's running this year a bill to ban gender and sexuality materials in grades 7 through 12, who last year was one of the most vociferous proponents of the Center for Intellectual Freedom, that couldn't even bother to extend an invitation to Representative Jacoby, who's on that committee, is here in this community for that event literally up the street. That's embarrassing on a multitude of levels. And so I think just taking that straight to voters, to have those conversations, not necessarily in a political campaign context, I think that's really valuable, and that would be my encouragement.
So to Senator Wall's point, I was briefed, it's like some months ago, by a program that the university does have that focuses on community engineering projects around the state. And various communities apply, and groups of students and professors every year, some community wins the lottery every year, and groups of students and professors go out, and at basically no cost to that community or minimal cost to that community, they fix their problem. They get to know the people in those communities. They build relationships all across the state. And they have, it's a small office, there's great pictures all over it. I know that there are also rural medical programs that the University of Iowa is working on all across the state, that there's like a mobile clinic that they work with all across the state. Those are the stories that don't get out. Those are the folks who need to be at the microphone and talking to people and talking to legislators so they understand the impact that's happening literally all over the state under their noses.
Thank you. Do we have someone here from the 4 Cs of Johnson County?
Hi, my name is Allison Bettine. I am the Director of Child Care Workforce Development at 4 Cs, as well as the Director of Family Services. In my position, I am uniquely situated to both advocate for child care workers, early educators. We coach, train, and uplift them so that their profession is respected in a way that allows us to be here and representing education for the youngest of our community members. I also work very closely with families who are low income. The child care center that we operate is primarily for children experiencing homelessness, at risk of homelessness, or low income. And what we are seeing is something that I would like for you to comment on, just because, on the one hand, allowing childcare providers to charge the difference between the CCA reimbursement rate and the private pay rate does allow them to stay in operation, right? And I remember thinking that this is going to be a boon to childcare workers. However, on the other hand, I am working now with hundreds of families who are qualifying for child care assistance, who are in desperate need of child care so that they can go to work and go to school. And none of them are able to find child care programs that they can afford because they show up with proof of their child care assistance eligibility and are also asked to pay sometimes $800 on top of that monthly. This means children are sitting at home with parents who would love to be working, and we just don't know what to do. I work so closely with these families, and we offer case management, and the program that allowed child care providers to charge the difference is now making CCA completely worthless.
First of all, thank you for the work that you do, Deb, for being here today. Childcare is very personal. My wife and I have a 2-year-old in March. He was here just briefly earlier this morning. We were one of dozens of families affected by a recent closure of our childcare provider. We got a notice less than 10 days before they were going to close because they couldn't keep the doors open. We, at that point, our childcare cost almost as much as our mortgage. We have 1 kid. Our childcare now costs more than our mortgage because thankfully we were able to find another childcare provider on short notice, but that new facility costs hundreds of dollars more a month than the previous facility that we were at, and they are open less often. Their doors are closed much more closely to the ICCSD calendar, which is no fault of ICCSD, but that means that there are many days when my wife and I are struggling to figure out who's going to be able to stay home with Elijah. We are very blessed to have 2 of my 2 parents who live in the community who are excited to help when they can. Not every Iowa family is that lucky. There was a report, this was about 1.5 years ago, in the Wall Street Journal that described Iowa's child care system as the most chaotic, least well-organized system in the entire country. The Wall Street Journal is not a bastion of progressive ideology, right? This is a direct reflection on the failure of Iowa leaders to take this problem seriously, to find a solution that both supports the child care workforce, child care providers that provide that essential service from a very young age to when kids are ready to go off to kindergarten. And it is a really complicated problem to solve because you have organizations like the school district trying to step up and help families and provide a low-cost solution, which unfortunately can also create challenges for those child care providers because it is those 3, 4, 5-year-old kiddos that are often helping basically to effectively subsidize the costs for parents when you've got kids who are much younger and those ratios are a lot lower. I'll tell you this is a concern that cuts across the political spectrum. I have talked to so many people who are in their 20s or early 30s, doesn't matter if they are Democrat, Republican, independent, third party, for whom the size of their family today is being determined not by how many kids they want to have, but by how many kids they can afford to have, which is a symptom of a society that has its priorities completely out of whack. And I would tell you that This is something that is going to continue to be a massive challenge for us as a state and will hold us back until we can get the right stakeholders together to solve this problem. And I'll tell you, the one thing I am 100% certain of, the way that we solve this problem is not by loosening the ratios that are required to take care of kids. And that is something that I see. I mean, nobody I've met thinks that that is the solution, but unfortunately, all too often, that is what Republicans are proposing. And I think it is awful that you have to ask this question today. I can just tell you how scared my wife and I were when we got that message on our child care app that closure was coming, and it is an enormous challenge. But I'm really grateful for you and Deb and everybody else across our community, across our state, who are trying to come up with solutions, because there aren't going to be any coming from Des Moines as long as this lot is calling the shots.
May I offer some background on the child care assistance crisis? My name is Deb Vandergast. I'm the child care nurse consultant for the county. About 10 years ago, the federal government required all states to tie child care assistance reimbursements to quality rating systems. Iowa chose to set it up so that prior to this change, all child care providers could charge up to 70% of the state average market rate for child care for their child care assistance. That meant in rural areas, potentially you could get reimbursed up to 100% of your rates because it was lower than in urban areas. With the new system tying it to the quality rating system, to get 70% of market value, you have to earn the highest score of 5 stars. The majority of providers earn 50% or less. In fact, so many providers were earning less than 50% of market rate that the federal government a few years ago had to threaten a $2 million fine to the state, which then brought even unregistered providers to the same rate as registered child care homes who were not participating in the quality rating system. So now unregistered or most providers only get 50% of market rate. You can't afford to take that loss when you're barely breaking even. And only 2% of providers in Iowa qualify for what all providers used to qualify for, because only 2% of providers have earned a rating of 2 stars or 5 stars. So this is why we have
Deb,
such
did you say 2%?
2%, and that's the last time I checked. I think it's gone down since we switched over from QRS to IQ4K because the requirements went up.
Well, maybe Deb or Allison, remind me, did we ever get rid of that ridiculous half-day rate stuff for CCA?
Did they finally get rid of that?
Yeah, I thought we were supposed to be.
Oh, they still have half-day rates?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's 5-hour blocks.
And I always thought it's a little goofy that, on paper it looked great that we allow individuals or families to pay a difference between the child care assistant rate and what the actual rate charged, except if you're someone who's eligible for CCA, it means that you don't have the money to pay that difference for the child care rate. And then, which is also problematic, are we still paying after the fact?
Yes.
In other words,
it's gotten better.
Many parents, maybe like Senator Woles, are probably paying their child care bill for January on January 1st, whereas the government will pay it maybe in February, maybe in March, unless you forget to check a box.
They can now bill every 2 weeks, and they get paid within a week after that.
So, but it's still after the fact.
Used to be, though, it was a month or two after you provided service.
So there's slight improvements there, but still, most child care providers will charge at the beginning of the month, and you pay your bill, kind of like rent.
And if you're absent, you still pay.
You pay it up front, but.
Yeah, you pay for the spot, whereas in child care assistance, you have a limited number of absences you can bill for.
And final question, CCA is still at 75th percentile?
No, like I said, the majority of providers are only getting about 50% of market rate.
And when's the last time we did a market survey?
Do you know that one? I think they do it every 2 to 3 years.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would just add to this conversation that childcare, whether you want to go from a pathos or a logos argument, is good for the community. It's compassionate care that improves socialization of children, and it's economic development. There's no reason that the state shouldn't be aggressively investing in childcare and working with childcare providers to make sure that the system works for families and for providers. It's genuinely ridiculous. And we can see examples in some small towns in Iowa that have taken the opportunity to go it alone of how successful that can be. But it's not, the statewide implementation is patchy, it's imperfect is way too nice of a word. It works for those who were already going to be able to figure it out. It still doesn't work for those who didn't have access to begin with. And it's just silly that we don't improve the system.
I just want to zoom out really quickly. Iowa is facing an outgrowth of young talent, probably more than any other state in the country, according to the statistics I've seen. I mean, and that impacts everybody. You know, whether it means your kids have left the state, whether it means you can't find a doctor in your community who can treat what you need, you know, whether you can't find someone to work in your local business. And we see this all over the state. And until we figure out housing and childcare, we can't even start to begin to fix that problem, which I think many people identify as the largest problem faced by our state.
So the dilemma that you described perfectly described what was going to be the obvious outcome of that bill, because you can't have people who are eligible for child care assistance then have to pay more of their income. So that is a perfect example to me of the government shirking its responsibility by trying to put that burden on the people who can't afford it and who need the care and who need to be able to go out and work so they can, again, as Representative Levin said, contribute to the economy by going out and working and having a job and growing this economy. So that was predictable. The governor's bill last year, the continuum of care bill that never passed, was an attempt to essentially, it was a shell game moving around money and that would have actually damaged certain child care centers, places that had relied on some of the funds that exist to get up and running, would have had the rug pulled out from underneath them, to mix metaphors. That didn't pass. The governor, however, still put in place parts of it without any legislative approval. If you read the Gazette, you will have seen not within the past week a top of the fold article about wanting to completely redo early childhood Iowa, which is another presumably disaster in the making, because when local areas have solutions that work, when you have a Johnson County and Iowa City that have put together the wage enhancement program and are looking for ways to continue to fund it and because it has worked to stabilize and to get people to stay in working in child care, and you're threatening essentially again to pull the rug out from under that is not a solution. So we need to have an overall plan, but it can't be this constant of the state government saying, you have to foot the bill, but we're going to take the control over.
If you don't,
Yeah, go ahead.
For those online.
I think just to restate the obvious, it incentivizes early childhood educators to prioritize certain income levels of students. So not only are children who deserve to have access to education sitting at home, but they're the most at risk. They are often Black, brown immigrants. They are the people that need the most assistance and are now being intentionally excluded from educational systems. I know many centers who have caps on how many CCA, and we can understand why it is financially necessary, and yet to know that they will only take a certain amount of Black, brown, poor kids is wild to sit with.
If there's one last thing that I could add on this, it's simply that we just heard probably like a half a dozen different acronyms, maybe more. it is a very complicated system that we have. It would have been great, if last year there had been some kind of a committee or a department that was focused on government efficiency that maybe could have thought about how to streamline or simplify some of these programs that was really focused on the most pressing challenges facing Iowa families. That would have been really, really nice, don't you think?
Thank you very much, all legislators and the two Debs. Okay, we're going to now accept questions from our audience. Please make a line at the microphone, state your name, and keep your question to 1 minute. All legislators will have the opportunity to respond to each question. Legislators each have 2 minutes to respond, and out of respect for all present, please do not interrupt speakers.
I feel like I'm cheating coming back up here again, but Deb Vandergast, Child Care Nurse Consultant for Johnson County. I have a separate question from Child Care Assistants. Expansion of pre-K programs is tremendous benefits for families and for the educational outcomes of children. I do support it. However, Johnson County has become the test case for why I have been saying.
At the same time that's happening, students are being marginalized. There was a bill just introduced that would remove the student member of the Board of Regents. And the legislature, while it fails to fund universities and make them affordable, wants to go micromanage the university it's not funded. And so the path Republicans have us on is to have essentially a private university without state funding that is micromanaged by far-right, out-of-state people in the Center for Intellectual Freedom. I think what Iowans need is a public university where professors have academic freedom, where they're invested in solving problems that Iowans care about and making our state better. And Iowans have been blessed with that for over 100 years.
So what can we do about the politicization until the point that we can introduce the proposal that the Board of Regents be directly elected? I would say every time a candidate for governor is within 30 miles of here, I'd love to see somebody there asking that question.
Yes. Thank you. I mean, it's really ridiculous.
Thank you, Sonia.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Any other questions pertaining to education, since that's our focus today?
Or whatever.
Well, while you're getting up there, I do want to add, because it is a piece of education, is the fight all six of us are in to help save our state historical society.
Yes.
And I didn't hear that question yet, and want to compliment Representative Zabner for leading the fight in this. We're making headway, and then we fall backwards and we make headway. But it's something that we're going to fight to the end of session to keep that open, because it's not only a great educational tool, it's our history. And it's our history, and it's true history, and we need to preserve it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Galen Wobetter, I'm a league member and concerned about a lot of things with education. So we need another question. And by the way, Dave, I'm really appreciative that you could partner with some Republicans on the historical thing. And I had read, I thought maybe it was dead, but you're giving me hope that the historical thing might not be dead. We'll see. And so that's great. I did want to ask you about this bill that has been proposed to have the community colleges have 4-year degrees. I feel this is horrible. We have 30 private colleges in Iowa that all need students. There are fewer and fewer graduates of Iowa high schools. They've been partnering with 4-year institutions effectively. I'm really discouraged to see that it got out of committee, and I just would like to know where it stands. And I also want to say thank you all for your work you do. It's so much to get your head around all these things. But yeah, if you would respond to me about that bill, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, it is out of subcommittee. We haven't dealt with it in the full committee yet, I believe. Okay. I think we will on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday. I'm sorry, there's 25 bills in that committee right now, and out of the 25, I endorse 0. But we did have a presentation. It was interesting. We had a presentation from 2 or 3 community college presidents. They were in rural Iowa sectors. We did not have DMAC. We did not have Kirkwood. We did not have the community college up in Hawkeye Tech or Hawkeye Community College. But the rural areas were proposing that if they could offer 4-year degrees, that they would capture a certain population of people who wanted 4-year degrees but didn't have access to them. Well, everyone has some access. Everyone has to make a decision whether to get that degree. To me, after their presentation, and they are fighting for students. And why are they fighting for students? Because we have a very limited number of students in the state of Iowa. Our graduating numbers are declining every year, and so their pool of applicants is shrinking. They are trying to stay open. But after I walked out of the presentation, I go, the irony that I'm seeing here, this is truly government competing with the private sector. Yep. Because there are 33 private colleges, well, 32 now after the one in Mount Pleasant closed, but that are working in partnership with the community colleges today. Every community college in the state of Iowa has a 2+2 program, or actually some of them have a 2+1, depending on your life experience and how many credits you have. So there are paths to the 4-year degree currently in place. I think that the number of people that they're looking at is a small number, and I am not sure that the Higher Learning Commission has yet approved that path in the state of Iowa.
Could you what was the last statement, Dave? I don't understand. Maybe others do, but what commission hasn't approved?
The Higher Learning Commission, they're ones that actually do the certification for the 4-year degrees. They help vet cross-referencing classes for the credit levels that you can get if you took a class at Kirkwood and then transferred to the university. Then the schools and the Higher Learning Commission look at those to make sure that you're getting equitable education levels.
So I'd add that the community colleges are asking for $20 million to start up whatever 4-degree program that would be. We have a massive budget deficit, so that alone, not sure where the dollars would come from.
Well, thank you all. I just hope that doesn't happen. It's not necessary at all.
The solution to these problems seems to be let's make it easier for people who can't get into a program. Like we have a certain representative whose son couldn't get into medical school. So instead of, improving public education and making sure that our education system from K through 12 is really nice and strong so that he could get into medical school, we just said, hey, medical school, you have to take all of these kids. And that's how we're going to fix, the loss of doctors in Iowa. We're going to force universities to take kids who maybe aren't qualified because we can't be bothered to make K through 12 education a priority so that these kids can get in there.
But I do think in my closing comments on the topic are that we really do need to recognize there are people that truly want a 4-year degree, that have some barriers to get that 4-year degree. What can we do within the current construct to give them a path toward that? And I think many of the private schools and our regents have a path. If there's a population, if there are a number of people that we're missing, let's go back and meet them where they are. Let's meet them where they are and ask them what they need to succeed. Is it this path? I don't think so, but I want to hear from them too.
I would just give one example of that. UNI has done fantastic work in partnering with community colleges to offer UNI accredited courses towards 4-year degrees through the community colleges so that folks who can't go to Waterloo who can't go to Black Hawk County and live there and live on campus and get their 4-year degree in the standard way we all picture when you're, 19 years old. That is available and accessible to them. And that program has been expanding and doing incredibly well. And something like that, I think we should be lauding rather than trampling over our public universities and our private colleges to try and ham-fistedly cobble together something that's going to give a similar credential without the background, the infrastructure, and the needed research.
And to add on to what Eleanor said, I know the University of Iowa, Barb Wilson, is very proud of the work they're doing with first-generation college students here from all over Iowa. So those are resources we can tap into as well at this university to find out what's working, how they did it, how they're keeping them here, and how they attracted them.
Before we get to the next question, I unfortunately have to run to my next event, so I'm going to be leaving just a little early. I want to say thank you to everybody again for taking time to be here this Saturday morning. If you ever have any questions for me about what is happening in the legislature, please do not hesitate to reach out. My email address is still zach.walls@legis.iowa.gov. Thank you all again for being here. Thank you to my fellow legislators. The work that these folks do representing you every single day at the State House, no matter whether you live in Janice's district or Dave or Amy or Eleanor or Adam's district, everybody here is fighting every single day to represent you, to represent our communities, and to make Johnson County and the entire state of Iowa a better place to call home. Stay warm, drive safe this weekend, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Any other questions on education?
Okay, I'll ask one on education, but just to let everyone know, I think you can ask any question if you have a question today.
Yeah, at this point.
I'm Vicki Aiden. I'm a league member. I had a question. The front page story on the Gazette this morning was about this bill to tax endowments in the state at colleges and universities that have over a certain amount. It's quite frustrating that legislators are looking to drive down endowments, which this will do, to replace millionaires paying their fair share in taxes because we've reduced the tax rate in the state. So I'd just like your comments and hopefully what we can do to prevent this bill from passing. Thank you.
I appreciate the question. I mean, I think there may be a national conversation to be had about this type of thing. When you look at schools like Harvard University and they're sitting on, tens of billions of dollars and they haven't grown their class size, I understand where that comes from. I think in Iowa, the endowments are playing a really important role in supporting education. And I think to your point, it's pretty rich to hear this kind of proposal from a party whose priority has been cutting corporate taxes and cutting taxes for the richest Iowans. I think that's where we would start when we want to talk about funding public education.
I'm just going to bring, so I was looking at the same article, Vicki. I was not aware of this bill until I saw the article, and so it was one I was interested in reading. And I just want to, so the bill has already been amended by Representative Collins, and his quote was the tax rate, originally in the bill it was going to be a 15% tax rate. His quote is, it will pare the tax rate down to whatever the corporate tax rate in Iowa is. I have two thoughts about that particular quote. First of all, I don't tend to think the word whatever belongs anywhere near our legislation. And second of all, our colleges and universities are not corporations. So the corporate tax rate does not apply to our educational institutions.
So I think at least 80% of the funds that go out of endowments are used for scholarships. A lot of those are used for scholarships for Iowans. They go directly back into education. They go directly back into bringing students into our universities and making sure that they get a good education and can work and earn a good living in this state. The sort of the whole notion of this reminds me of a variety of other things that I've heard even at a subcommittee with respect to the Historical Society, which is like, why doesn't Johnson County pay for part of the Historical Society? One of the more absurd things that I've heard, since it's a state issue. But these are, the other reason it reminds me of that is because people give to the university endowment for much the same reason that they might give their papers to the Historical Society. They want to support that institution. They want to support its future. They want to support the future of Iowa. And that's an entirely different animal. They're looking for other sources of revenue, clearly. If you look at the revenue estimating conferences, we'll see the next one, as Dave mentioned, in March. This is not a source of revenue for them. It is an endowment that's been created to enhance student access to and ability to get educated at our universities.
And it's a control thing. Look what they tried to do last year for our community foundations. Tried to limit, we're trying to control and limit, and there's a paranoia that it might be going to the wrong people or the wrong programming, and it's frankly none of their damn business. But when people donate money, they can donate money to where they want it to go. Bottom line is the budget's a mess. The reason the budget is a mess is not only because of a flat tax, and don't get mad, I support the flat tax. I think it simplifies it. The problem with the flat tax is not everyone's paying it.
It's not really flat.
That's where the problem is. It's not a true flat tax at all. The reason our budget is in trouble is because of the use of one-time monies. A lot of the money from the COVID emergency, a lot of the money is coming from President Biden's supporting of our infrastructure. The reason we're tanking is because the gross wages in Iowa are declining. The number of people working and the wage rates that they're earning. Just think, 1,000 people laid off at John Deere, 75 people laid off locally at Integrated DNA Technologies. People being laid off trickled out in many businesses, including the university. So our higher paying jobs we're losing in the state. And then when you make $65 an hour at John Deere and now you're working at a corner gas station for $10 an hour, you're not going to pay as much in income tax. So that is another main reason that our budget is tanking, is because the gross taxable wages are also declining in Iowa.
If we want to drive down property taxes, if we want to grow our state, we need to be a welcoming place where people will want to come and live and stay with their families, and that will increase the amount of money coming into our coffers. But there's a lot of work that has to be done on the policy side in order to get to that point. So they can afford, as I said at the outset, so they can afford their housing, so that we can access childcare, as we discussed, so we have terrific public schools that their kids can attend, that we need, and so that we can keep, as Adam talked about, keep our young people here.
I like the shirt, Mitch.
Thank you. I wore it. I try to fit in with children, so that's the best thing. I like to call this suburban dad chic. That's just the way I try to do myself. Mitch Lingo, I am on the Iowa City School Board of Directors, but I am not, this isn't a board of directors question, this is more my own curiosity. In two of the property tax proposal redo bills, the governors and the Senate, both of them have diverting money from the Secure and Advanced Vision for Education, also known as SAVE. For the people in the room that don't know what this does, part of it, it's the 1 penny sales tax that started in maybe 2008. Brady can probably talk more about getting that passed in Johnson County if he wants to sometime. But sorry, I didn't know it was 30 seconds. But the point of the thing is that it funds technology. We can, as a school district, we put it towards student family advocates as well, which is our school social workers. But the big thing about SAVE is it allows us to bond out. So bonding out allows us to go up to 2051 to pull money in and build buildings that we believe we need now. What is the discussion on regarding the SAVE changes, what is the discussion on school districts that have already spent their SAVE money? Because there are a lot in the state that have spent, like, or FMP 2.3 that are 3.0 that will spend out till 2047. So it's like, I'm looking at this and I'm wondering, will we still be able to have money for technology, or are they taking that away?
And it's painfully obvious that SAVE helps lower property taxes, because that's part of the formula. On a positive note, there are discussions that have been happening in the House, and this is on a bipartisan note, that many people, there's 170 school districts that are actively using their SAVE funds, and many of them have bonds that are out 0 to 20 years. So to make any changes to the SAVE system now would just tank some of the schools. And many of these schools are in rural areas that desperately need the SAVE dollars. So I would be surprised if the SAVE piece of the property tax proposal gets through the House. I'm not sure about the Senate. I hope it would be the same in the Senate. But right now in the House, there's people on both sides of the aisle going, that's kind of a dumb idea. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. That means it'll pass. but not with our votes. No, but I think there is literally a brick wall being built saying no. The intent of this was for the use at schools, and we need to leave that piece alone.
When it was created, when it was extended, that was in fact so that school districts would have that financial certainty, so they could bond against it, so they could build their infrastructure and think into the future. Imagine that. I don't think that it will fly in the Senate either, but it is yet another indication that our colleagues are looking for funding sources when they haven't built the budget. When they don't have the resources that they know we need because of the policies they pursued.
I would just add, I think that's a really good question, Mitch, and one that I hadn't really thought of, honestly. The question I've been pursuing on the SAVE proposals within the property tax bill, specifically the governor's proposal to require 30% of SAVE to be used for property tax relief. A portion of SAVE is already used for property tax relief, and I've been trying to get hard numbers on how much of SAVE is, like what difference are we talking about? What change are we talking about? And it's been surprisingly difficult to even nail down that number. So I will look at, we'll.
And the nuances in some of the property tax bills about having to go back to bonding and then people vote again at the 60% supermajority vote, and we would be voting again for something that we already voted for. So that's kind of repetitiously redundant. People have voted, and that's why it's in place. So again, I hope it doesn't go far.
We have time for one more question.
One final question, not about education. This, I thought, was very interesting, and it could be very positive. I think that there's a bill. I couldn't believe it that you folks only make $25,000 a year. When I read that, I was shocked. And I believe there's a bipartisan bill to raise your salaries. I am all for that. I just wonder where it's going and what you think about it.
I'll believe it when I see it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is that all we make? Now I know why my wife is so pissed. I'm sorry, I didn't say that. No, yeah, that's been around for years. The last time our salary went up was 2006, I believe, and that was one of my first years there. And the problem with politics is it's so darn political, and that's one of the things, if anyone votes to raise your salary, that'll be the headline in the next election cycle. Now, frankly, I don't have strong feelings to raising the salary, but there's good arguments for that Representative Kaufman made in his statements and Representative Forbes made last year in his statements. though I will say this, Representative John Forbes, super good friend, super smart pharmacist, super great, eloquent speech about raising salaries, and then he voted no. So, because he was running for a different position, and that's the political quandary you have. For me, I'm fine with it being at 25K because I knew going in, but it is very antiquated for the amount of time that we invest. And that's one thing I'm very proud of this group of 5-6 people is we love representing you. We love coming to forums. We love meeting with people, and we all do this one-on-one in the coffee shops. We meet, year in, year out, whether we're in session or out. So I think, $25, it does work to $1.67 an hour, but it is, honest to gosh, it's the political quandary on raising salary.
So Senator Walz, he left, but he's been the youngest member of the state Senate for 8 years now. If I retired tomorrow, most likely you would get someone who is either independently wealthy or retired in my seat. And I think what you're seeing is a condition where the legislature is not representative of the people of the state of Iowa because of, the sort of just challenges that go to serving. And I think we're all proud to serve, but my concern is that if there is an action taken, you're going to see a legislature that is older and older and richer. And I think there's space for all types of perspectives, but that causes a real problem. And just one thing I'll add, the number of members we've seen retire because they have kids. And, essentially it becomes untenable for them to serve. And we've talked today about a bunch of issues that impact working families. And that's a perspective that is often missing at the Capitol because of the structure of the job.
Well, I went to Des Moines because I had kids. So
no wonder they left the state.
But that is true. But remember, too, that we're based on the ag economy, and that's why we meet January through usually May. And not only salaries are very important, the other piece of the puzzle is to have an employer that's very understanding, but that you can work the other 8 or 7 months out of the year.
There's another important piece to this, and that is the minimum wage in Iowa has been stuck at $7.25 since 2008, I believe. Virtually all our neighboring states, with the exception of Wisconsin, now have a substantially higher minimum wage. When we have Iowans telling us time and again that they can't afford things, that things cost too much, that wages are too low. As much as I might like to say yes, we should, for the reasons articulated by Adam and others, have a higher wage for legislators. We need to pay Iowans more first.
Yeah, I'll just add, the average income in District 89 is not that much higher than my legislative than my legislative total compensation package is worth. And so while I would really love to make balancing my financial obligations a little bit easier, I can't hire a clerk from my district because our clerks don't make enough to be worth the drive from someone who lives in Iowa City to come to Des Moines to work for me.
Don't say that in front of my clerk.
Your district has a slightly different demographic than mine. It's just the case that Iowans across the board, we talk about at the federal level, we hear a lot of conversations about the widening income gap. It's incredibly visible here in Iowa. It's incredibly transparent here in Iowa, and it's every single family. There are folks for whom, paying $6 for eggs is a no-brainer, and there are folks for whom they're not getting eggs that week. And it's our professionals, and it's our working class folks, and it's your elected officials all having that same striation pulling us apart. It's not sustainable, at least not if we want to be a cohesive society.
Thanks. Thanks to all of you. Those questions and responses made this a really informative session. Thanks to all watching live stream on Facebook as well. We're going to conclude the forum with closing remarks from each one of you. Legislators will have 3 minutes for their remarks, and we'll begin with Senator Weiner.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all my colleagues who are here. Thank you to all of you, again, who showed up today, both in person and online, and who may watch this subsequently from having had it recorded. I don't have much to say in terms of closing remarks, except to please continue to pay attention and watch carefully what unrolls over these coming months. Watch what is done to increase the burdens on those who have the least. If there are further limitations to SNAP, if what happens with Medicaid, watch closely what happens with school funding, because despite claims that are from our colleagues that they want to lower property taxes, downward pressure on school funding, you've heard about budget guarantee, will put upward pressure on property taxes to fund our schools. We have been talking to Iowans. We will continue to talk to Iowans. We want to hear from you. If you would like to email any of us, we all have that same pattern, janice.weiner@legis.iowa.gov. Please come to the Capitol. Please participate in subcommittee meetings. Those are the parts of the legislature where you can either participate in person on the House side or watch on the Senate side. You can actually participate over Zoom when it comes to bills that you're interested in. So I really appreciate, as I said, showing up. Bring more people to the next forum. We need to hear from more Iowans. And I'm going to have a list here, just a plain yellow sheet of paper. If you don't get my legislative newspaper and would like to, you can sign up. Thank you so much.
Representative Jacoby.
Thank you again so much for being here today, online and in person. Janice mentioned subcommittees, and it is a procedural thing that many people do not know. But when we have subcommittees in either chamber, in the House, you can show up in person and you can make comments to that committee. Subcommittees are your chance to give your opinion in live real time. Now, the problem is obviously getting to Des Moines, and during the winter, that can be a little happenstance. You can submit your comments online also, but subcommittees are the key to when many of the bills either proceed or don't proceed. And a lot of times those bills are stopped or at least enhanced in a positive way when citizens show up for those meetings and give your comments, because those are so important to everyone sitting at that table. One thing I'll say in closing too, I was just a little disgusted or dismayed in the governor's budget that she's advocating to cut some of the veterans' resources for the populated counties. And these resources aren't huge in nature. We're talking $10,000 per county. And this is money that goes to our veterans who are in need of services. Well, she's developed a formula that would send a lot of the money from Johnson County to much, much smaller counties. In Johnson County, we have over 5,000 veterans, 5,200 veterans, if I remember correctly. Many veterans need support services, and it's just astonishing to me that the governor's proposing cutting services in our county. We have more veterans in Johnson County than they have people in 11 counties in the state of Iowa. So please keep an eye on that. We want to make sure our veterans get the services they need, and that's something that I'll keep fighting for too.
Representative Nielsen.
Thank you. Thanks again to everybody for being here and the League for hosting these every year. Just a little bit off of what Representative Jacoby was saying is, especially here in Johnson County, we've seen it over and over and over again that the state government likes to be punitive to communities that are doing a good job, and communities where people are wanting to move and live and be productive, and that where people are happy. And we definitely have that here, and that's great, and that's why people want to live here. it just means we're going to have to fight a little harder for it, unfortunately. We've heard it for a long time. If you want to see things changed, then elect more Democrats. And while I absolutely believe that, we also need to just change our society. Unfortunately, people it's a haves and a have-nots. The state is very much divided that way. It's no longer rural and urban. And if you can't be happy that your neighbor got a new car or a job promotion, then that's the problem. And so we're just seeing way too many people at the Capitol with their extreme ideas, and they're there and they're getting reelected because their constituents believe them, and because their constituents think that if somebody else gets something, that means they lose something, and that's just not how it should work. And I know that maybe this is a little bit of, this is definitely preaching to the choir, but I don't know what went wrong, but I'm really excited for our younger people coming up. They don't feel that way. And so maybe eventually we will get back to people actually caring about their neighbor and wanting to have more of a collective society where everybody participates and everybody is truly treated equally. But us, we need to let the younger people have a crack at it, I think. So I guess I'm trying to put myself out of a job. But thank you very much for being here. Sorry, a little bit of a downer note this month. But hopefully next month we'll have some better things that we can share with you guys.
Representative Levin.
Thank you, Roxanne. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Lily and Ty. And thank you to the League for hosting. Thank you to everyone who stays engaged and calls and writes and emails and finds me on WhatsApp. I don't to say what the heck is going on with this bill. I feel like we're really lucky to have an incredibly engaged core group of people. What I would like to see for Iowa's future is more people able to be aware and paying attention, but not feeling like their life or livelihood is at stake every single day. If they miss one day of reading the daily bill packet, then that might be the end of their world. You elect us to do that for you. And everybody in the state should be able to trust that their elected officials are looking out for their best interests. I know that seems like a big ask, but it's genuinely all we're asked to do. We're asked to go to Des Moines and look out for the best interests of the people who elected us and the people who live in our district, whether they elected us or not, whether they're too young to vote, or whether health kept them from the polls, or whether they just plain disagree with us. And so, I've had the real great fortune over the course of the interim to get to travel across the state, doing not only knocking doors for special elections, because we had an absurd number of them in 2025, there were 6, but also participating in education listening posts all across the state. And it was genuinely heartening and exciting to see folks come out in every single place to talk about not D versus R, but what their local schools need. We got to hear from teachers, administrators, union reps, students, parents, grandparents, special education educators, paras, all across the state. And there were a lot of similarities in what they're looking for and what they're needing. And so this educational focus, it brings us together as a state. And I think there's real opportunity there to rebuild and find some of that unity and compassion that Representative Nielsen is looking for.
Representative Zabner.
Thank you all so much for having me, and it's great to be here. I appreciate everyone that came out in the cold. On Tuesday, the Capitol might be a little quiet because a lot of our colleagues will be in Clive fanboying over President Trump. And I don't know if he'll bring in his Qatari plane. They'll probably be cheering for, I don't know if he wants to talk about Greenland or putting his face on Mount Rushmore or, stealing billions of dollars through cryptocurrency, whatever it will be that day. I'm going to be at the Capitol working on affordability for Iowans because that's what I hear Iowans are struggling with. They're struggling with the fact that Republicans have massively raised their healthcare costs, they're struggling with the price of housing, and they desperately need our help. That's what we're working on at the Capitol every single day.
Thanks to the local television staff for recording this event and live streaming it on the League's page. Rebroadcasts of this forum will be run on the Iowa City Channel 4, Coral Vision, and North Liberty TV. See their respective websites for programming. Our second legislative forum will take place at the Coralville City Hall on February 28th from 9:30 to 11:30. The focus will be on environment and water quality. Please join us, and thanks again for today.